The hum of the Resistance's underground base was the only sound breaking the silence. It had been days since Earth received the ultimatum. Days of planning, sleepless nights, and endless calculations. The Galactic Empire, a behemoth of cold, unfeeling technology, had given humanity two choices: surrender or perish. The terms were final. The date of execution was set. But, despite the overwhelming odds, Captain Marcus Flynn stood before his team with a resolute grin, as though the Empire had just handed him a challenge, not a death sentence. "We're going to do this," Marcus said, his voice calm but laced with determination. He was tall, broad-shouldered, and his presence commanded the room. He had seen battle, felt the weight of countless lives depending on him, but it was the defiance in his eyes that made him a leader. The large room filled with murmurs as his crew, a mix of soldiers, strategists, and engineers, gathered around the holographic display. The image of Earth, scarred but still standing, glowed in the center of the table. Marcus's team had one goal: strike the Empire where it hurt the most. But the cost? It could be everything. Serena Vidal, the commander of their covert operations, stepped forward. Unlike Marcus, she was compact and precise, every inch of her bearing suggesting a mind that had calculated every possible outcome and dismissed them as inadequate. She pulled up the Empire's fleet position, showing their endless warships surrounding Earth, forming an impenetrable wall of advanced technology. "They don't understand us, Marcus. They think we're weak. They think we're a dying species," Serena said, her tone cutting through the room like a blade. "Let them think that," Marcus replied, his voice unshaken. "That's where we've got them. We don't need brute force. We need ingenuity." He tapped a few buttons on the console. The blue light of the hologram flickered for a moment before revealing a string of data points, the schematics of a forgotten weapon, an Earth relic no one had dared to use in centuries. A device that could disrupt the Empire's tech, even if just for a moment. "You're telling me we can disable their fleet with this?" Serena asked, eyeing the screen, the skepticism in her voice barely veiled. "It's a long shot," Marcus admitted. "But it's all we've got. We won't take them down, but we can blind them long enough to do what's necessary." The tension in the room thickened, hanging heavy over their heads like an inevitable storm. Every person here understood what that necessary meant. They were playing for survival, and the stakes were as high as they could go. "What's the plan, Captain?" asked Lucas, the young tech specialist who had been quiet until now. His voice, always a bit too eager, was tinged with the unmistakable fear of a man who knew too much and too little at once. Serena cut in before Marcus could speak. "First, we need to create a diversion. We don't have the resources for a full-on assault, so we'll have to strike fast and disappear before they can regroup." "And after that?" Marcus asked, his eyes narrowing. "Then we get close enough to their command ship," she replied, her gaze flickering with both calculation and caution. "We hit it with everything we've got. EMP, drones, everything in our arsenal. Just long enough to disable their weapons systems. We'll have one shot." Marcus nodded slowly. "We'll need all hands on deck for this. Every ship, every soldier. No mistakes. If we get one thing wrong, we won't be leaving this room alive." There was a pause, a silent understanding shared by every person in the room. No one dared voice the doubts that simmered beneath their confidence. They had no backup plan. There was no escape route. They were going to fight, or they were going to die trying. "Let's move," Marcus said, clapping his hands once, signaling the start of their final offensive. Serena turned to the map again, but this time, something different clouded her thoughts. For all her strategy and expertise, there was a gnawing feeling in her chest. They were fighting an enemy that could wipe them from existence in the blink of an eye. But in that moment, something shifted inside her, a flicker of resolve. "Let them underestimate us," she muttered to herself. "Let them think we're finished. We'll show them that humanity still has a trick or two left." The room was bathed in a cold, blue glow as the countdown began. The ships in their fleet were preparing to launch. The Empire's fleet was out there, vast, unmoving, its presence like a tidal wave waiting to crash. But this was a different kind of war. The kind that couldn't be fought with sheer numbers or firepower. Marcus, his hand on the control panel, stood facing the crew one last time before they entered the fray. Remember what we're fighting for. This isn't just about saving Earth. This is about showing the galaxy that humans are not to be underestimated. No matter what happens, no matter how many of us fall, we laugh in the face of the Empire. Serena's eyes met Marcus's, the fire of determination reflecting in both their gazes. The time for words had passed. Now, it was time for action. The lights flickered as the countdown hit 0, and the first ships launched from Earth's atmosphere. The war had begun. The roar of the engines was deafening, but it did little to drown out the tension in the cramped cockpit of the Vanguard, the lead ship of humanity's last resistance. Marcus Flynn sat at the helm, his fingers dancing over the controls, eyes scanning the horizon of space. The stars outside were swallowed by the vastness, but the Empire's fleet loomed just beyond, a wall of cold metal and technology far superior to anything Earth had ever known. Serena Vidal was beside him, eyes fixed on the digital display, tracking their progress. The glowing red dot on the screen marked the Empire's flagship, the Imperium, a gargantuan warship that commanded the entire fleet. It was as if every step they took brought them closer to the jaws of a beast, and with each passing second, the odds stacked higher against them. "We're entering their detection range," Serena's voice was sharp, calculated. "If we don't act fast, they'll spot us. No turning back." Marcus clenched his jaw. The plan was reckless, but it was all they had. Disabling the Imperium for just a few seconds could turn the tide of the battle. It was a risky move, one that could end their mission, and their lives, before it even started. "Get ready to deploy the EMP," Marcus ordered, his voice steady, though his heart was racing. He didn't need to look at Serena to know she was tense, her mind already miles ahead in strategy. She had been the one to recommend the EMP, the one who'd insisted they had to take a gamble. Marcus trusted her expertise, but there was always the lingering question, would it work? Suddenly, the ship shuddered. The sensors screamed, and the walls around them vibrated as though the Vanguard itself was under attack. The Empire's sensors were more advanced than anything humanity had developed, and it didn't take long for them to detect the Vanguard's approach. "We've been spotted," shouted Lucas, the tech specialist. His voice echoed through the communication channels, a note of panic creeping into his tone. "They're locking onto us. Prepare for fire. Hold steady." Marcus barked, his hands tightening around the controls. The Vanguard jolted as enemy fire skimmed past their shields, lighting up the dark expanse of space with brilliant, deadly flashes. Serena remained calm, her fingers flying across the console. "Shields holding, but we're losing power in the starboard engine. We won't last long at this rate." Marcus grit his teeth, his mind racing. They were outnumbered, outgunned, and their window of opportunity was closing fast. "Do it now," he shouted, his voice cutting through the chaos. Without hesitation, Serena activated the EMP. The ship trembled again, but this time it was different. This was the kind of tremor that meant they were striking back. A burst of light erupted from the Vanguard's belly, a blinding pulse that shot through the vacuum of space like a shockwave. For a moment, everything fell silent. The hum of the engines died down. The vast, oppressive wall of the Empire's fleet seemed to pause, as if stunned. And then, just as quickly as it had come, the silence shattered. The Imperium's massive bulk flickered, its power grid collapsing as its communication systems went dark. One of the largest warships in the galaxy was crippled. A cheer erupted from the crew, but Marcus's expression remained taut. They had taken the first step, but the battle was far from won. "It's working," Lucas said, his voice strained with disbelief. "We've knocked out their comms and targeting systems. We have 30 seconds before they reboot," Serena warned, her eyes scanning the sensor data. "We need to move, or we'll be sitting ducks." Marcus's mind snapped into focus. They had a window, one brief moment in which they could strike again, before the Imperium regained its strength. "We're going in," Marcus said firmly, his voice commanding. Prepare the drones. We hit them now. Outside, the stars seemed to blur as the Vanguard plunged deeper into the enemy fleet. The smaller ships, once mere distractions, now moved with precision, executing a flawless dance of evasion and attack. Marcus could feel the ship's engine roar beneath him, its power thrumming through the floor as they picked up speed. Serena stood, her eyes never leaving the display as she coordinated with the drone pilots. They're pulling back. The Imperium's shields are starting to come back online. We won't have much time before they return fire. We'll make it count, Marcus replied, his fingers flying over the console. His heart pounded in his chest as he gave the command to deploy the drones. They shot off like arrows into the void, their sleek forms cutting through the emptiness with deadly precision. The drones targeted key points on the Imperium's hull, its power conduits, its shield generators, anything that might give them the upper hand. The first wave of explosions rippled across the massive ship, sending shockwaves through the vacuum of space. "Good hit," shouted Lucas. "We've done some serious damage, but they're counterattacking." The Imperium's recovery had begun. The shields reactivated, and within moments, enemy fire began to rain down. The Vanguard rocked with each hit, the hull groaning in protest. "We can't take much more of this," Serena called, her face tight with strain. "If we don't break off now, we'll be out of options." Marcus looked at the screen, at the vast fleet closing in on them. For a brief moment, it seemed as if the odds had tipped in their favor. But then the Imperium fired back, a single beam of destructive energy slicing through the Vanguard's starboard side. "Brace!" Marcus shouted, gripping the controls with white-knuckled hands. The ship tilted violently as the blast shook it to its core. Marcus's vision blurred, but through the haze, he saw Serena's eyes, cold, focused, unwavering. "We keep fighting," she whispered, her voice a promise. The deafening silence of space was shattered by a distant explosion, reverberating through the hull of the Vanguard. Inside, Marcus Flynn could feel the ship groan under the pressure, the walls trembling as they absorbed another barrage from the Empire. His hands gripped the control panel so tightly that his knuckles whitened, but it did little to steady his nerves. "We've got major damage to the hull." Lucas's voice crackled over the comms, panic edging his tone. "The starboard side is breached. We're losing air." Marcus didn't respond immediately. His mind was calculating, each decision a fraction of a second closer to either salvation or destruction. The Empire's fleet was closing in faster than anticipated. Their window of opportunity was rapidly closing. Serena's voice cut through the tension. "We can't outrun them, Marcus. We need to fight, or we're dead." Marcus's gaze flicked to the readouts. The Vanguard was limping through the void, but the Empire's ships were relentless, their numbers overwhelming. His ship had already taken too much damage to escape. "I know," he muttered, his jaw tight. "But what do we have left? We've already spent our drones. The EMP's only going to last so long." "There's one more thing," Serena said, her voice hardening with resolve. "But it's risky. We've got the prototype cannon on board, the one that was supposed to be our trump card. If we can line up a direct hit on their flagship." Marcus didn't let her finish. "I know what it is, but it's untested. It could destroy the Vanguard in the process. Are you suggesting we use it now? Do we have a choice?" Serena's voice was sharp. "It's the only shot we've got left." The decision hung in the air like the threat of an incoming storm. Marcus exhaled slowly, pushing away the weariness that had settled in his bones. His crew was counting on him. Earth's last hope rested on this moment. They couldn't afford to hesitate. "Fine. We do it," he said, his voice steady. "Prepare the cannon. I'll get us into position." As Serena moved to activate the weapon, Marcus turned to face the rest of the crew. "Listen up. This is it. We fire everything we've got. If we don't hit them now, we don't make it out of this." Lucas and the other crew members nodded grimly. There was no room for doubt now. The battle was as much about their survival as it was about saving humanity from extinction. The Vanguard groaned as it adjusted course, the remaining thrusters struggling to maintain stability. Marcus had only one shot at this. The Empire's fleet was closing in. In less than 5 minutes, they would be within range to destroy the Vanguard for good. "We're locking on now," Serena called over her shoulder, her fingers dancing across the controls. The tension in her voice was palpable, but there was an underlying note of hope, a rare spark of optimism in the chaos. Marcus could see it on the screens now, the Imperium, looming large, its dark silhouette a threat that could obliterate everything. They needed the shot to count. 30 seconds to firing position, Serena announced, her voice now almost a whisper, as though speaking louder might jinx them. "Hold steady," Marcus muttered, his mind racing as he watched the enemy ships, calculating their trajectories. If he misjudged this even slightly, they would all die. There was no room for error. He wasn't just gambling the Vanguard, he was gambling his entire crew's lives. The Empire's ships were almost within range. Marcus felt the heat of the impending explosion in his chest. The Vanguard's hull was weakening by the second, and their engines were sputtering. If they didn't fire soon, they would be sitting ducks. "Fire," Marcus ordered, his voice calm but resolute. There was a tense pause before the Vanguard shuddered again, the ground beneath Marcus's boots vibrating as the prototype cannon fired. The pulse of energy shot forward, a blinding beam of raw power that cut through the vacuum of space. The world seemed to hold its breath as the energy beam connected with the Imperium. For a heartbeat, nothing happened. Then the Imperium flared, a massive explosion erupting from its central core as the beam tore through its shields. The ship groaned, its engines sputtering. "Direct hit!" Lucas yelled, his voice filled with disbelief. "We've done it. The Imperium is taking heavy damage." The tension broke, but Marcus wasn't celebrating. He could see the fallout on the sensors. The Imperium wasn't completely disabled. Its shields were down, but it wasn't finished. The Empire's retaliation would come swiftly. "We've got seconds before they recover," Marcus said, his eyes fixed on the rapidly regaining power of the Empire's fleet. "Prepare for immediate evacuation. If we don't get out of here now, we're done." Serena looked at him, her expression hard. "We're not retreating, Marcus." "Not yet." But even she knew the truth. The Vanguard was a broken husk, and the battle was far from over. Marcus gave one last glance at the trembling form of the Imperium. They had struck a powerful blow, but the war was far from won. The real question was, could humanity survive long enough to strike again? The ST dramatically in TH. The Vanguard groaned as it limped through the vast emptiness of space, its systems sputtering and failing one by one. Marcus Flynn stood at the helm, his mind racing through endless calculations and contingency plans. His fingers hovered over the controls, but the ship's flickering consoles told him everything he already knew: the Vanguard was dying. The mission, humanity's last hope, was on the verge of collapsing. "We're not going to make it, are we?" Lucas's voice broke through the tense silence. His words hung in the air, both a statement and a question. The young navigator stood by the viewport, his gaze fixed on the now recovering Imperium. It was regrouping faster than they'd hoped. Marcus clenched his jaw. "We've still got one shot left," he replied, his voice steady but laced with uncertainty. Serena stepped forward, her boots echoing in the control room. "You know what we need to do," she said, her tone firm, almost cold. "We can either go out swinging or we can go out with a whimper." Marcus turned to face her, his eyes narrowing. He didn't need to hear her suggestion, he knew exactly what she was thinking. "You want us to board the Imperium?" Serena nodded, unwavering. "It's our only chance. If we don't take the fight to them now, while their shields are down, we'll never get another opportunity. We hit them at their core, Marcus. We stop them from regrouping. It's now or never." The words hung in the air, and Marcus's thoughts raced. He knew the risks, he had a crew to protect, and a ship on the brink of destruction. Boarding the Imperium meant certain death for them all. Yet the flickering hope in Serena's eyes mirrored his own desire to defy the odds. The survival of humanity depended on this. He turned to Lucas. "Prepare the escape pods," Marcus ordered. "In case it all goes south." Lucas didn't argue. He simply nodded and moved to carry out the orders. "I'll prep the suits," Serena said, already heading to the armory. "It's not just about us surviving, it's about winning." Marcus watched her leave, her words echoing in his mind. It wasn't about survival anymore. It was about something more, a chance for humanity to stand up and defy the oppressive might of the Empire. A chance to prove that humanity wasn't just a fading memory in the universe. The moments ticked by in a haze, the vanguard still drifting helplessly toward the Imperium, now barely holding its course. Marcus could hear the hum of the damaged engines sputtering in protest, and the dull thrum of the weakening shields. They had only minutes left before they would be nothing more than space debris. "Boarding party ready," Serena's voice came through the comms, her tone controlled but urgent. "We're going in." Marcus nodded. "Then let's give them hell." The ship shuddered as the docking clamps engaged. Serena, Lucas, and Marcus suited up in the combat armor they had left, feeling the weight of the situation settle into their bones. It was all or nothing now. As the airlock opened, a flood of cold, artificial atmosphere rushed in, and the trio stepped onto the exterior of the Vanguard, the silent void of space surrounding them. The Imperium loomed ahead, its dark form stark against the void, a gargantuan symbol of oppression. They moved swiftly, silently, using the momentum of the Vanguard's last course to propel themselves toward the enemy ship. With every passing second, the tension mounted. Marcus could hear his own pulse in his ears, a rhythmic reminder of the stakes. This was it. No turning back. Serena's voice crackled over the comms as they neared the Imperium. "We've got one shot to get inside. The enemy will have fortified their entry points by now, but we can get in through their maintenance bay. It's unguarded. Once we're in, we split up. We take out their command center and power core." Lucas tapped his wrist pad, checking the time. 10 minutes until we're in firing range. We have no more than 5 to disable the ship's core before they retaliate." Marcus pushed forward, moving with precision, his mind locked in on the task ahead. "We don't need 10 minutes. We take the ship down now." As they closed in, Marcus felt a surge of adrenaline. The Imperium was enormous, its sleek, menacing surface reflecting the cold light of distant stars. They were about to infiltrate the heart of an empire that had terrorized the galaxy for centuries. But as he looked back at Serena and Lucas, their eyes steely with resolve, he knew one thing: they were humans. And they would never go quietly. The Vanguard's last desperate gambit had already bought them a fleeting chance at victory. Now, it was up to them to ensure that the Imperium never had the chance to regroup. Marcus didn't know if they would survive the next few minutes, but he was certain of one thing: they would make it count. The docking bay door slid open with a hiss, and Marcus stepped forward, leading the charge into the heart of the Imperium. The countdown to their fate had begun.